introduce Mark Banicevich, who's going to introduce Matt Wong from our Queenstown community. So I'll hand over to you, Mr. B.
Thank you very much, Tricia. Really exciting presentation ahead of us. Following a science degree at Massey University, studying our beautiful native birds of prey, actually, Matt Wong found his way into the Queenstown tourism industry via the iFLY Visitor Centre. Before long, he was running the show, and he moved on to run Queenstown tourism businesses for Ngāi Tahu, while moonlighting with a commercial photography business for about 14 years. In 2018, Matt started iFLY Indoor Skydiving. If you've ever wanted the experience of jumping out of a plane without actually jumping out of a plane, which seems like a much smarter approach, then iFLY is for you. I believe we've got a short video to get us started, and then we're all yours, Matt.
Kia ora, and thanks very much for having me along this morning. It's been really interesting hearing the discussions. And while I'm in tourism, we are all affected by economics in one way or another, especially in the last 2 years. I see one of the titles was about Mission Impossible, and it certainly has been a mission impossible over the last couple of years for us, that's for sure, in tourism. So I'll back up the bus and tell you where that title came from. So I was talking to Richard and Rest about our story and my background. And the last role I had was I was running a helicopter company here in Queenstown. It was a scenic helicopter company. And we did flights to Milford Sounds, into glaciers and mountain landings and those sorts of things. But we also did a whole range of other things as well that wasn't tourism-based. Things like firefighting, or we used to dry cherries over in Cromwell so that they didn't spoil and the export crop could go to market. We dropped off Department of Conservation workers and trappers and hikers and hunters and all sorts of things. One of the other things that a lot of people didn't know we did, because a lot of times we were signing NDAs, we did aerial filming for Hollywood. So when I talk about Lord of the Rings, Narnia, Wolverine, 10,000 BC, Pete's Dragon, the list goes on and on. The last movie I worked on was with a gentleman named Tom Cruise, and that was the latest movie of Mission Impossible. They spent 3 months down here with us, and a phenomenal chance to work with some great talent, both in front of the camera and behind. But basically what that means is as a tourism business, we learned very quickly that we needed to diversify and not just rely on tourism. So that came with me as I started up iFLY. So I started iFLY for an American company in 2018, and iFLY, as you saw in the video, simulates skydiving freefall, but it's much safer and it's accessible to all. So we have all abilities, people in wheelchairs, all sorts of things. And I was just off the phone to a 71-year-old who was singing our praises, and she said she lost 30 years of her life or gained 30 years of her life by jumping in our tunnel. So that gives you a bit of an idea. So let's back up the bus even more to March 2020, and that's when COVID really hit us. And what that meant for the tourism industry, in 2019, we were the biggest contributor to the national GDP, and then borders closed in March 2020. And for Queenstown operators, we lost 80 to 100% of our international market. 80 to 100% of our total market, which is quite significant. For our business, 20% of our market was domestic. So that's what we had to work with when we went into that first lockdown in 2020. So a pretty scary proposition, and we led a response which was a little bit different. Now, in 2019, that was our first financial year. So we were a startup, and we were used to testing and validating, failing, and moving on very quickly. And we were very good at hustling, shall we say. So that was actually quite a good lead up to a crisis like COVID, where a lot of other businesses had been trading well for decades and were comfortable. We were never comfortable. So coming into COVID, what we did is we looked for the opportunities, we looked for the gaps, we looked for places where we could play that no one else was playing. In the first week of lockdown, we started advertising. And those were sort of examples of opportunities that we saw that no other tourism businesses was looking at. Facebook and Google were offering value adds. So if you spent $500, they'd double that. And at that time, all of New Zealand was locked down, staring at their phones. iFLY wasn't really a well-known brand in 2020 up until COVID. So this is a great example of taking advantage of a crisis. And that was what our intention was. 2019, we were really struggling to get any headway whatsoever because you had a saturated tourism market. So it disrupted the market completely, and we found a great way to pivot our business. July 2020, we had the highest number of sales out of any international iFLY tunnel in the world. So just to give you a bit of a picture, iFLY is a global company, and there's 87 tunnels all around the world. So for little old Queenstown to outperform every other tunnel in the world in July 2020, straight out of lockdown, was pretty phenomenal. So what we initially did is we looked after our team. So we're a service industry, and without a crew, we couldn't deliver anything. We were dead in the water. So we made sure we looked after our team. We didn't make any redundancies. So that was another thing we did that was completely opposite to everyone else in the market. We said to our staff, "We've got you back." We looked after our weakest link, and to give you an example, as I said, I said to my weakest staff member, and I won't name names, but everyone has a weakest staff member in their team that they scratch their head and wonder how they're going to get rid of them sometimes. I said to that staff member, "Don't worry about it. I've got you back. You're not going anywhere." What that message did to the rest of the team was, okay, if he's got their back, he's got our back for sure. What we also did is we engaged our accountant very quickly, and we worked out when our last dollar was going to get spent. We applied for every government grant there was. But what we also did is we looked at what the New Zealand public was saying about Queenstown tourism. Pricing was a big one. So we launched with a very competitive price. We did marketing when no one else was marketing, but we also looked at new markets. So yes, we're in tourism, but we thought, how else can I use a 12-foot vertical wind tunnel? We looked at education. That was an easy one. So there was a lot of schools, high school, tertiary, that usually go overseas and do education tours over there. We started up STEM program, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. We talked about physics and the physics of flight, and then we threw them in the tunnel. But we created revenue as a result of that. We also engaged the pro-fly community. So this is people that love jumping out of planes for a sport. But we delivered them something that was a lot cheaper, a lot more efficient, and a lot quicker to train in, and that was training in a wind tunnel. And that led on to getting a military contract with the government. So there's no better money than government money, we know that. And so we managed to get the New Zealand Defence Force to start training in our tunnel as well on a consistent basis. So again, having revenue outside of tourism was that pivot that we needed to do. So leading on from that, we set some pretty big, hairy, audacious goals. This is what all businesses have to do these days. And to give you an idea of some of those goals, one was to have an NPS score that was over 80%. The other one was to have a positive EBITDA, become a household name, and win some awards. So those are some pretty big goals for last year, considering we still went through some pretty tough times, and we were only dealing with a domestic market significantly reduced. So we managed to tick off most of them. So we've got an NPS score of 91%, which is pretty unheard of in the tourism industry. We have had a positive EBITDA for the 2 years running, so that's 2020, 2021, and they have outperformed 2019. Household name, not sure, but I know there's people on this call that have done iFLY and they rave about it, so we need to create more people like that. And winning awards was a big one for us. We're only in our third year. First year was startup, second and third year was COVID, and in our third year, we managed to pick up Chamber of Commerce awards for customer service delivery. We also managed to pick up a Tourism Industry Aotearoa Award for Employer of Choice. So, you know, again, we're ticking off some pretty major milestones in a time where tourism is almost dead in the water. You know, we were the first to be hit by COVID, and we'll probably be the last to recover as well. But there are opportunities to grow. One of those opportunities was in February last year. I actually managed to do a management buyout with the American-owned company, and now I've purchased this business. So they called me crazy. I probably am a little bit, but I took a little bit of a risk, and it's a calculated risk. And the reason I say that is because I've been in tourism 20 years, and I know that this market is strong. The desire to come to New Zealand is extremely strong. And while there's rhetoric about changing away from tourism and we're over tourism, the reality is it's a massive revenue generator internationally for New Zealand, and you can't just throw it out. But we do need to grow back better. But we're not the only industry, of course. There's other industries that definitely also need to grow back better as well. So the goals for this year and beyond, diversification. You know, I've heard a lot about tech talk, and I'm looking at how we can diversify into tech. I'm looking at how we can diversify into investing into green energy production. You can imagine this building, this iFLY tunnel, burns a lot of electricity, and it certainly does. So how can we actually turn that on its head, invest in green energy, and so that offsets what we use, but then actually contributes to a revenue stream for us as well. So yeah, it's been a fascinating ride. I am aware that I haven't got much time here to tell you the rest of our story. But I guess the lessons from what we've done over the last couple of years has been we are a service industry, and you guys are in the service industry as well. And if you have to face customers, basically you're in a service industry. Now, for me, I have 16 staff, and I held them all the way through COVID, and they've been with me now for 3 years, and they don't look like they're going anywhere anytime soon. Now, these are 20 to 30-year-olds. We talk about millennials and Gen Z, and I've somehow managed to crack the code with these very young staff, and I've never worked with Gen Z or millennials really before. They are just the same as everyone else, but what they desire is, when we look at the COVID crisis and reaction of what happened, they desire a bit of safety and belonging, and they want input, and they want to be part of what we're building here. A lot of the crisis, we talked about psychology, and if some of you are aware of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, basically it's a pyramid of describing what a basic human needs in order to survive and be happy. And the bottom tier is physiological needs. So can I pay my rent? Can I buy enough food to survive? The second one is safety. And in this environment, have I got a job? Am I going to keep my job? And the third one is just belonging. Do I feel like the boss actually wants me here? So if you can deliver those three tiers, which is what we've done, and we've really focused on that purposefully, you can create a world-leading team. And that's why we have won the Chamber of Commerce Service Delivery Award, and why we have very little turnover, and why we're one of the few tourism businesses that is not short on staff. So we talk about labour shortages. And I think when we look at labour shortages and retention, a lot has to be said for the leaders within all our companies. And I'm not just talking about tourism here. We have to look at ourselves as a leader and where we've come from, and look at what best practice is right now. So I realise I'm very limited with time today, so I'm going to stop there and I'll pass it back.
Wow, Matt. As much as I love my job at Partners Life, hearing your story really makes me question my life choices. Despite the challenges that you've had over the last few years with COVID, that's an amazing story. And for me, the biggest takeaways were how, one, when COVID hit, you jumped in and looked after your staff, and then your people are going to rally behind you, and they'll become such strong advocates for your business. And I think that's just a really huge win. And then from that, after discovering how much money you had and how long you could eke that out, the work that you did to find out what else can we do with this service, and then moving into, as you say, education, and then ultimately the military. That's just a fantastic lesson, I think, for all of us on how to get through that crisis, focusing on your people first, and then secondly on your business. So thank you so much for that story. I really hope that later in the year, when we come down to Queenstown to do this in person, we'll get to see you again and hopefully experience iFLY. I'm really looking forward to it. So thank you so much, Matt. I really appreciate your time.
No, my pleasure. Thanks very much.
Tricia, back to you now.
Look, Matt, before you go, thanks for your energy and your passion and commitment. We've got your back, because a few of us agreed on this call before we went to come and do it, including me. Can't believe that I put my hand up. But we'll get back on that, and we'll make sure that the people that come with us support you as well. Fantastic story. You're a great representation of hospitality and tourism in Queenstown. So thank you, and go well.
My pleasure. Thanks very much.